Why are some teams greater than the sum of their individual parts, while some add up to be less? You've been on a team like this. The ones that are greater than some of their individual parts feel like a 1 + 1 = 3 team. This is the high performing team. And then you've been on some teams that are 1 + 1 = 0 teams, where you are literally less than the sum of your parts, where you're like, I'm worse off because I'm on this team. Let's dive into that and try to understand the 6 levels that get us into high performing teams. The 1 + 1 teams, where you start off, is usually in the solid mid tier. We call this the 1 + 1 = 2. This is where most teams start off. You're equal to the sum of your individual parts. What you are here is usually, you're just a group of people, right? You're a group of people that have come together. You each do your part and you hand it in, right? It's a little sequence. It's nice. It's kind of like a school project. I do my part, you do your part. This is where teams start when they first come together. And then one of two things potentially happen. A lot of times we drift. And when we drift, it's because the team's either falling into silos, they're having a bit of dysfunction, they're not getting along. And we sort of have the saying, if you want something done right, you do it yourself. And so what happens is you get these 1 + 1 = 0 teams. And you end up in this dysfunction. When we're in this dysfunction of teams, we often are not having fun. We're not engaged. We don't really want to be there. We feel like we'd be better off by ourselves. We feel like we could get more work done if it wasn't with anyone. And so we end up creating these silos and getting really stuck in it. But you're watching this video because you go, I want to make my team better. And maybe I want to get out of this dysfunction. But really where you want to get to is not drifting, but if you're really intentional about what you are building, you can build these 1 + 1 = 3+ teams, where you are greater than the sum of their individual parts. This is what we call an actual team. This is when it gets exciting. This is when I am better because I am part of this team. My standards are higher because I'm part of this team. I am held to a higher account and I show up. If you've ever played sports, it's kind of obvious, right? You're on a team and you're playing an opponent that is not as good as you, and you actually play down to their level instead of, when you're playing a tough team, you play up to their level. The 1 + 1 = 3 team has really high standards. And unless we're intentional, it's really easy to drift down this way. And so when we're looking at different levels of teams and why some are greater than the sum of their individual parts while some add up to be less, we have to ask ourselves, what actual behaviors, what characteristics, what attitudes, how do these teams show up that makes the difference? And that's what we're going to dive into. We're going to dive into 6 different areas that help you move your team from a 1 + 1 = 0 to maybe a 1 + 1 = 2, and ultimately to this high performing team of a 1 + 1 = 3. When we're looking at teams and we're looking at the 6 levels of high performing teams, we want to understand this as like a dependency model or like a hierarchy model. So what we do is we end up drawing this as a pyramid. And why is it a pyramid? It's because there's foundational levels, and then there's levels that stack on top. When we're looking at the 6 levels of high-performing teams, where people focus and where people want to be is obviously right here up top. This is the area of vision. This is the exciting area. This is the 1 + 1 = 3 teams. They're right up here. They're teams that are rowing in the same direction. They're teams that are working, they're collaborating, they're communicating well. Everything feels like it's moving. There's momentum, there's excitement. People make each other better. That's where we all want to be. And this is when we have a strong culture and we have strong strategy. And everyone is trying to really win with a lot of intention. Everyone wants to get to this level, but there are actually things we need to do to get there. But your team doesn't care about your vision if they don't think you care about them. And so to build your high performing teams, while this is your goal, that's the end state. That's what comes when we do the foundational pieces. We get to a point with a team that actually has a vision and is rowing in the same direction. So we want to ask ourselves, what are the actual foundational elements that make high performing teams? And the first layer makes high-performing teams is an interesting concept that comes from Amy Edmondson. She actually does her work in hospitals and in surgery teams. And what she's trying to understand is what made surgeon teams more impactful than other teams. So when she's looking at her table of data, she sees that surgeon teams have the highest amount of impact on the success of surgeries and the satisfaction of their patients. She sees that on the other side of the table, they have the highest amount of mistakes. And it's kind of confusing at first. She goes, oh, maybe it's a volume issue. They're just doing more surgeries, therefore they have more mistakes. And so she runs the data again and she's looking at it and she corrects it for ratio volume. She sees that nothing actually changed. The highest impact teams have the most mistakes. And so to try to understand this, she goes and actually sits down with these surgeon teams. She watches them in the surgery room. And when she starts watching them in the surgery room, she notices something interesting. It's not that they make the most mistakes, it's that they report the most mistakes. And that slight nuance difference tells us this concept of psychological safety. Psychological safety is the base of this pyramid. And psychological safety basically tells us someone's willingness to share a mistake, someone's willingness to take an interpersonal risk and actually not fear the consequence of that risk, which means speaking up or asking a silly question. What happens with these surgery teams is because they report more mistakes, more people on their teams learn. And because they report their mistakes, people aren't afraid to speak up. And because they learn and they're not afraid to speak up, they end up making less mistakes, less crucial mistakes in the long run, while the lower performing teams were hiding their mistakes and not actually discussing it. When we want to build psychological safety in our organization, really what we're looking at is an input of relationships. The stronger relationships we have in our team, naturally the stronger psychological safety. And the stronger psychological safety gives us an output of learning. We have a team that learns more effectively. We have a team that feels safe enough to learn. That's the base of our high-performing team. Now, if we want to get to the next level of high-performing teams, when we have a base of psychological safety, we can enter the next level. And the next level is empowerment. Empowerment is about efficient, effective decision-making. Really, the question you ask yourself is, how do I get my team making more efficient, more effective decisions? Actually, there's sort of two areas we want to look at. We want to look at the high velocity of decision-making. We want faster decisions, more efficient decisions. We also want better quality decisions. We want high quality decisions, but it feels like they're at odds, aren't they? When you go faster with your decisions, you get less quality decisions. When you increase the quality of decisions, you slow down decision making. And because they're at odds, the only real solution to keep pace of decision making up while quality of decision making up is by pushing decision making down to those who are closest to the problem, which is empowerment. So empowerment is fundamentally about decision making. If I have really good empowerment, what I get is really effective decision making. I get faster and better quality decision making. But the question is, what's the actual input that gives us better empowerment? Well, part of that is psychological safety. Psychological safety allows us to have better empowerment because I'm not going to pass off risk. When I feel like I'm going to get a consequence or in trouble for making a decision, what do? I go to my manager and I go, here, there's your 3 options. What do you think I should do? And I wait for my manager to tell me what I should do. I wait for my leader to tell me what to do so that if I just do what they say and it goes wrong, I go, well, I just did what you told me and it's not my fault. And so empowerment is about pushing decision making down. And so this is what we want to do. We want to push it down to those who are closest to the problem and actually give them space to do this. And that gives us the second layer of high-performing teams. The third layer of high-performing teams is all about effective communication. And effective communication, the best way to understand it is to think about 2 inputs. All communication has what we call the flow of communication and then the substance of communication. So think of like communication as a liquid flowing through a system, a pipeline. The flow is the pace of that water going through. That's how it flows. The substance is the quality of the water. Is there minerals in it? Is there plastics in it? What's the substance? And so communication in teams is the same. When you're thinking about the flow, is how easily does communication go through your team? Are we transparent about the information? Is it easy to access the knowledge in your organization and in your teams? Do people know what's happening? Are they aligned? And we call this a synchronization of information. When information flows well and there aren't bottlenecks, then the teams can better align. That one's actually the easier part of communication. The harder part is the substance. The substance of communication is where people get stuck. So I was telling you about how there are 1 + 1 = 0 teams and 1 + 1 = 2 teams. The 1 + 1 = 0 teams actually get stuck right over here they never develop psychological safety. These are the 1 + 1 = 0 teams. But the 1 + 1 = 2 teams, they get stuck at effective communication. This is where they get stuck. They're 1 + 1 = 2. The reason they get stuck is they might get good at flow, but they never get good at substance. Substance is actually about productive conflict. So hear me out. I know you might think conflict's a bad thing, but when it comes to communication, conflict is the journey to truth. It is when we start debating the ideas that we can create a meritocracy in our organization where the best ideas win and not just those in power. Not those with the biggest personalities or those with the most authority, but that the best idea in our team wins. And if we want the best idea in our team to win, what we need to do is we need to find this place of productive conflict where it's not artificial harmony, where we all pretend like everything is okay and everyone's just getting along, or mean-spirited attacks where we're attacking people and judging each other, but that instead we debate ideas. And if we can find this place of productive conflict where we balance empathy and directness and have this level of candor, then we can develop effective communication. And we don't pull back our punches, but we say what we mean. And if we say what we mean, we are going to get better ideas. And in fact, we're going to get a feedback loop because the result of really good effective communication is feedback. And you can see how the feedback feeds into the decision making, which feeds into the learning. And there is a loop here between psychological safety, empowerment, and effective communication that really creates the culture of an entire team. This base of the pyramid is often the hardest and where people spend the least amount of time as managers and as leaders, where they end up focusing their time is more on the top layers of the pyramid. Naturally, it pulls them because it's a bit easier, but those top layers can't be developed effectively if we don't have this base. So what are the next two areas? The next area is what we call a culture of leadership. And a culture of leadership is interesting to think about because it's likely if you're watching this video, you're the leader of your team and you'll probably spend a lot of your time leading. And the question I want to ask you is, are there other people in your team that are also leading? Or are you the only one leading? In a culture of leadership, there's fluidity in who leads, but there's also fluidity in the style of leadership. And so the input we want to look at here is fluidity in both the leader and the style. When we allow fluidity in who leads, we give people chances to run the team, to make decisions, to affect culture, to be empowered and to own. When there's fluidity in how we lead, we start to understand that the golden rule doesn't really work. That we can't just treat others how we want to be treated, but that we have to treat them how they want to be treated. That each situation requires a different type of leadership. That to empower someone, they need to move from, a controlled environment to a managed environment to perhaps a coached environment and finally an empowered environment. And that this is a spectrum. So what happens when you have a good, strong culture of leadership is that you have multiple leaders emerging. And the result here is that you have a multi-leader organization that can now flow and grow better. And what you have is effective coaching that happens. When you have effective coaching, it feeds the feedback, the decision-making, and the learning all the way through. And now the fifth level of high-performing teams. This fifth level of high-performing teams looks at a combination of meaning, contribution, and innovation, progress. When we feel that we're progressing, we do better. So we're gonna call it innovation. And innovation comes from a couple things. One, feeling like my job matters. There needs to be meaning. I need to feel like there's something that matters here because then it makes me willing to try and improve it. And then two, there needs to be a real culture of learning where we're allowed to spend time doing experiments. And if they can do that, you notice that the psychological safety feeds right into that. Really, there's a relationship between each of these layers. If I can spend time with meaning and I feel like my work, I'm not just a cog in the machine, but I have real meaning to what I do, then I'm more willing to try and constantly improve how I do my media work, improve how I write code and software, learn the new AI tools, spend time learning maybe on an evening or weekend, really trying to improve my team as a whole. And so this fifth layer around innovation really gets us an output of more effective strategy. That's what gives us. This gives us a better strategy for the team. This gives us more room where people are thinking at a strategic level. They have enough white space in their team that they're not just stuck trying to tread water, but that they're actually moving things forward. And finally, that gets us to vision. I told you vision is an end result. It's where people want to be. But vision also has an input. For us to have a really good vision, we also have to pair that with purpose. Purpose and vision go hand in hand. Vision is about where you want to end up. It's the end goal. It's like in 5 years, this is where we want to be. But purpose is the reason we do work. And if we have purpose paired with vision, people will be able to, be with you on the ride. Be with you and want to build the team, even though you might not have it all figured out, even though you might not have all the answers, you are able to actually get there. These are the 6 levels of high-performing teams, and this is what you need to do in order to actually create a team that is going to be powerful. But you don't, as a leader, create this just for your team. This is going to help you. When there's psychological safety, you as a leader feel like you can speak your truth more. When there's empowerment, you as a leader are not bottlenecked. Your team actually is able to run with things. When there's good, effective communication, you as a leader is not the one that has to talk to everyone, make sure everyone's aligned, but they're talking to each other. When you build a culture of leadership, they're coaching each other and they're holding each other accountable and to their commitments. When there is a culture of innovation, you're not the one that has to come up with all the new ideas, but your team comes up with new ideas and make things better. And when there is a vision and there is a purpose, you don't have to be the one always pointing the direction. They know where they should be headed and they can build their own teams to get there. So those are the 6 levels of high-performing teams. And this is the step-by-step plan for you to actually build that team and get to the goals that you have for yourself.